Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SB Reacts, where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Live for Tomorrow, titled Live by the Sword. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen on Music B with Yard here. This song is titled Live by the Sword. This is off of the upcoming Visions of Midnight album, if I'm not mistaken. This is an unreleased track, and we're going to listen through it from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it. Let's go. What do we got?
To the granite hot and cold, a prophecy I wrote, a story to unfold. Every victory claimed was paid for in advance. A hollow throne built on a calculated chance. You create the fire.
I like the tiredness of those guitars and kicks.
You create the fire. You pull the fatal lever. This adrenaline rush, it can last forever. The shadow knows the dead is coming due, and the mirror shows the face of the one who slew. The hand that swings the hammer will feel the metal bite. We stand on borrowed ground beneath the failing light. And when the blade turns inward, when the cost is finally paid, there's no redemption here for the choices that you made. Live by the sword and you will fall. You tore down every bridge, you lost it all. The cycle closes in, a perfect iron ring. This is the consequence, the broken future brings. Die by the sword, it's what you were.
Great switch up going from halftime to normal.
Of your fury, crash and burn. The fire you started is the one that sets the funeral fire. Consumed by your own self-inflicted fire.
Okay. String sense.
Another victim counted, another line is crossed. Did you ever calculate the true emotional cost? A monarch made of scars, ruling over dust, blinded by the hunger, betrayed by your own trust. You built a fortress just to keep the world away, but you forgot to check the lock on Judgment Day. The arrogance of power is a thin, brittle sheath, and now you taste the poison of the weapon underneath. Hand that swings the hammer will feel the metal bite. We stand on borrowed ground beneath the failing light. And when the blade turns inward, when the cost is finally paid, there's no redemption here for the choices that you made. Live by the sword and you will fall. You tore down every bridge, you lost it all. The cycle closes in, a perfect iron ring. This is the consequence, the broken future brings. Die by the sword, it's what you earned. Watch the empire of your fury crash and burn. The fire you started is the one that sets the funeral pyre. Consumed by your own self-inflicted fire.
Is this additional context?
Close. Every single wound was self-inflicted. Your fate is fixed. It comes for you. It comes for you. It comes for you. The sword was always pointed back. It wasn't their fault. It was always you. The end you feared was the one you chased. And now you pay. and now you pay.
So that was Live for Tomorrow, or Live by the Sword, off of the Visions of Midnight album. I'm going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. And so welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Live for Tomorrow, titled Live by the Sword, off of the Visions of Midnight album. In this section, we're going to talk about a few things that I liked about this track, as well as any sort of like applicable constructive critique. And then finally, my sort of general thoughts from a listener's perspective. So, first of all, what do we think this track is about? I think this track is fairly straightforward in its messaging. It seems like it's a song sort of saying to someone, hey, you're the reason that all these things have happened both to you because of what you've done to others, the damage you've caused. It could have been prevented if you'd been less selfish and more careful, but you have sort of like fallen on your own sword in this situation. You've chosen to live by it, but it's been your undoing. So I feel like that's a story that a lot of people can sort of get behind, and I think that the general sort of like metal styling across the board with the mixture of vocal fries and growlers, as well as the guitars, sort of like synthy strings, keys, bass and drums, they serve that to sort of create that ether really neatly. Things seem quite well connected, so I think that that's sort of appropriate subject matter that's quite accessible for people. I think that the vocals are done well. There's a lot of variety with it. We have some sort of cleaner vocals with some fry on them that are very sort of comfortable in their range there. We have some more sort of aggressive kind of growls and sort of like harsher stylings that are a nice contrast to the cleaner vocals that I think further portray the frustration that we feel with this person. So the expression seems sort of like appropriate for what we're talking about here. I think we also, if I'm not mistaken, have some sort of like female vocals or kind of like lighter vocals near the end and upper register as well, just for a bit of further sort of variation to the composition, which is always kind of cool. And there are some different tails and adjustments to the main melodies within those sort of like verse and chorus sections as well, which is really cool. We don't rely on the same hook too much. So I think that that's well connected. And there's also some sort of like double tracked parts which have an interesting sort of like fizz. Like there's an interesting fizz to a lot of instruments in this mix. Like there's a little bit kind of like artificing and a bit of kind of harshness to some of like the kick tones, for example. They have a weird kind of high in resonance in some of those from like a production perspective, which is kind of interesting, as well as like a kind of a fizziness to the guitars. But with that said, I feel like the vocals themselves are well handled. And I just think across a 4.5-minute piece, you really need that. I think also the ideas on the instrumental parts, such as specifically with, I think, the drums and the guitar and when they are and aren't there. I think that using power chords as a more sort of straightforward harmonic device to help behind a more melodic or kind of colorful lead line is a smart move because it doesn't sort of interfere with it. There's no kind of weird kind of uncomfortable notes or potential. There's less of a potential for sort of like flat seconds or any of that kind of stuff. I think as well, the general sort of tightness of the chugging of those double kicks as well with the sort of like the rhythm parts is fantastic. I like the tightness of the performance there. It's also nice to have some sort of like mid to high range lead guitar parts that are sub leads along what's going on with the main vocals at the beginning. I think it's nice to explore the guitar's range and to sort of use it as more than just a zero device, a zero generator open string. And so we have moments throughout this track structurally where there's a heaviness with either the palm muted kind of power chords or the chugging, and the kicks are kind of like very kind of like intense. But we do explore the drum kit as well, and there's a wide variety of different kick, snare, and cymbal patterns across the quarters, eighths, and sixteens. I think the keys when they come in, as well as some of the sort of synthy parts there, the synth strings, they come in oftentimes without as much of an emphasis on the lower end resonance of like the guitars and drums, and they just have room to kind of create this ether or atmosphere that's a contrast. And I think that's really important because even within like a 4.5-minute piece, you just can't take the listener's attention for granted. So it's not just that we have different perspectives or like further kind of like explanation of what we're discussing. It's that we're kind of still trying to make it interesting for the listener as we go through the piece. I would question whether the track needed to be 4.5 minutes, as I feel like a lot of the subject matter that we're discussing was kind of covered by the first 2 or 3 minutes, but also at the same time, there could have been stuff I missed within the lyrics. I had a quick look through them, but we could have potentially also have included some additional kind of lead lines or like a solo section or something like that, just to add a bit of further variation. I don't mind the industrial kind of like metal elements, like the new metal kind of stuff that we have in a lot of stylings from like the late 2000s, early 2010s, and especially more recently, I suppose, with like progressive bands, but still, you know, there's a lot to appreciate, and I think this is just stuff for future releases. I think also the kind of rapping that we have around the 2-minute mark is kind of cool. Again, we're really not taking the listener's attention for granted with the vocals. It's like the focal point of the piece, which I find is really interesting, because the drums and guitar also have a lot of variation to their various sort of like rhythm parts, and as well as some of their lead melodies and arpeggios. And sometimes it's nice just to keep it heavy as well and to not overcomplicate the lead parts or the upper register. I think the bass is well handled for the most part, but mainly the guitar, drums, synth, strings are, and the keys were like the main sort of like points of contact outside of the different vocal styles. And so ultimately I feel like it was fairly well fleshed out. And so from then, I also think it's the general leveling of things as well as the effects change in certain instruments. So I feel like the vocals were well compressed and EQ'd, you know, stylistically appropriate. The growls sounded leveled and had presence within the mix. The guitar, bass, drums, and the keys and synths, while some of the elements again had this kind of weird kind of like high end resonance there, which kind of made it sound a little bit kind of like phasey. You know, maybe we're just going for like a unique tone or something like that. Nonetheless, I still appreciate that they were well leveled in the mix, and they sort of went around the stereo field, and when you needed to have again those really fast sort of chugs with the double kick, they were nice and heavy. And we went in and out of those. There was dynamic range in part due to the layering of tracks within the composition as well as the overall studio production. I think the filtering that we had on some of the key parts as well as the delay and reverb tails that kind of made it seem like it was in the background a little bit and kind of spacey and wistful was kind of interesting, like almost sort of introspective or a mystical ethereal sort of environment. And then again, to be snapped out of it by the heaviness of the guitar, bass, and drums is a cool sort of like structural thing. And so, yeah, I think that ultimately, you know, it's nice and loud without pumping. It's mainly the variety of especially the rhythm instrumental sections with the vocals and then the production. Again, I think in terms of applicable constructive critique, there was like, again, that kind of weird kind of mid to upper like 4 to 8 kilohertz kind of resonance, maybe even like a 2 kilohertz one with some of the instruments where they sound a bit phasey. And you could have also potentially have included some sort of like a lead solo or a layer on top of parts, like a background guitar solo just to further elevate one of the last choruses. But again, it's stylistically more common to have a more sort of straightforward with like a more sort of vocal oriented part of that point anyways outside of the breakdown, so that's totally fine. From a general listener's perspective, I hear this and I go, you know, where would they go next? And with the assumption it's probably going to be about human interactions and how we approach each other and looking through, you know, like how honest we are with each other and how we treat other people. I assume Visions of Midnight, the album, is probably going to be more of that. So I feel like if people are looking for music specifically about our social interactions and kind of learning from it and trying to be better people and also distancing ourselves from toxicity from others, I feel like the stories will resonate within this album for a general part, and it's probably worth checking out. It'd just be good to hear some more sort of like solo sections and other tracks. But either way, thank you for watching my review of this track from an act named Live for Tomorrow, the song titled Live by the Sword off of the Visions of Midnight album, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via the various social medias, and I'm sure there's been all digital streaming platforms at some point soon. Stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.